Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1.
The thinking atheist. It's not a person. It's a symbol. An idea.
The population of atheists in this country is going through the roof.
Rejecting faith. Pursuing knowledge. Challenging the sacred.
If I tell the truth, it's because I tell the truth. Not because I put my hand on a book and made a wish.
And working together for a more rational world.
Take the risk of thinking for yourself. Much more happiness, truth, beauty, and wisdom will come to you that way.
Assume nothing. Question everything. And start thinking. This is the Thinking Atheist Podcast. Hosted by Seth Andrews.
Holy cow, have the last several weeks been like a crash course on Russia. I'll admit I had a cursory knowledge of Putin. Like I knew almost nothing about the precursors to his dictatorship, the things that informed his rise to power, his penchant for violence, his lust for conquest. Wondrium has a series that gets into the fall of the Soviet state 30 years ago. And then what happened after? You know, how the oligarchs and the opportunists just swooped in and they built power and fortune on the rubble and on the backs of the everyday Russian people. Why does Putin harbor these weird authoritarian revenge fantasies against all of his perceived enemies? And yeah, we're talking about Ukraine these days. Hugely topical, this Wondrium series. Just one of the many series they have from the great courses, alongside the others from Craftsy and Magellan TV, etc. Been beneficial for me. I think it will be for you as well. It's taught by a Russian specialist, Lynn Ann Hartnett. It's called Understanding Russia, A Cultural History. Learn at your computer, on your phone, with the app like a podcast. Wondrium connects you with knowledge at your speed, on your schedule, and because we need to stay informed in this crazy, overwhelming world. So get the scoop on Russia, past and present, or whatever topic turns you on. I know you'll love Wondrium just as much as I do. What are you waiting for? Sign up now through my special URL and start your free trial. Go to wondrium.com/Seth. Remember, WONDRIUM.com/Seth. Wondrium.com/Seth. You know, one challenge with doing so much content, and also I think of getting older, that sometimes I can't remember which stories I've shared and which stories were just sort of pinballing around inside my skull. Did I tell you about having to go over to Mom's house to put the shelf together? Did I mention that? Mom actually asked me for a link to this broadcast a few months ago. I can't imagine she lasted more than 15 minutes of whatever first link pulled up. I'd like to know what my son is doing out there. Well, I'm no secret. There's a dozen years of content out there, hundreds and hundreds of podcasts and videos and speeches. And oh, look, there's some books. I mean, it's not like I'm hard to find. Okay, here's the link. I doubt she's listening today. I don't know, though. If she is, hi, Mom. Mom had invited me to help her put a shelf together at her house. Of 50-some people in the immediate family tree, I'm the one who gets the text. Hey, can you come over and help me put this shelf together? Your father used to do these. They're kind of complicated. I can't figure it out. I could use a hand. Now, after a dozen years of having all these arguments, these sort of have been pawed at with all of this theology. They're trying to fix me, bring the prodigal home, blah, blah, blah. The stuff you already heard. I'm suspicious, and I think rightly so. But I try to be a good son, so okay, I'll put the shelf together. And it's one of these little IKEA kind of things. It comes in a box about this big, and it takes, I don't know how many little dowel rods and plastic connectors to put together. It's got little wheels on the bottom, you know. But I get, it's a little complicated, so I'm splayed out there, got the instructions, got the pieces, all putting it together, and and I'm kind of a captive audience. And lo and behold, the sermonizing begins. Did you know, son, that a statistician has recently revealed the Bible must be absolutely 100% accurate and true because no human imagination could have ever conjured any of those stories from whole cloth. They couldn't be made up. They must be true. I didn't have a car that day. We were a one-car family that day, and so I just Ubered home. Mom's like, oh, I'll give you a ride. No, I'm good. Thank you. No, I'm good. Hey, Mr. Uber driver, can you get me the hell out of here? Did I set myself up for it? Maybe. It's still irritating. These weird defenses of the indefensible. I went to Iowa State University recently, and I spoke to the atheist/free thought group there. And we had several Christians in the audience, and I'm glad they were there. I did a speech which was essentially describing how mainstream Christianity is itself a blood cult. And that speech is going to release to YouTube in a few months. I'm touring with it for a while. Christianity is a blood cult. Right? We're covered by the blood. Are you washed in the blood? We take communion and drink the blood. You know, there's a lot of different examples. And I talk about how in other religions, faith traditions, and other cults, Christians point and mock and, you know, they're aghast at it. Oh, my God, I can't believe people actually do this, but they accept it in the Christian faith. And I had several Christians queue up to the Q&A microphone after the speech to challenge me. The first guy says, are you concerned about your sarcasm and mockery? You know, if you're out there in the culture trying to win in the arena of ideas, was the point. You know, why do you mock? We've heard some of this. And I don't mock in the one-on-ones, but I'm struck by that question. All right, hang on just a second. I'm talking about, you know, torture and execution. I'm talking about passion plays and Jesus getting spikes pounded through him on the cross. I'm talking about cannibalism in the name of God, especially in the Catholic Church, which thinks that you are literally eating flesh and drinking blood. We got into the rape verses of the Bible where Yahweh commands a rape victim to marry a rapist. You know, the entire crazy Illuminati batshittery that is the book of Revelation, where we've got the death of a third of the planet at the hands of 200 million horsemen, and the whore of Babylon comes. You know what I'm saying? I mean, blood and bloody hail comes down, and there's fire, and there's just madness and murder and mayhem and torture and awfulness. And I was struck by, after all of these specific parts of the Bible that I quoted, his number one concern was my tone. I treated him with kid gloves. I was very kind and compassionate. Somebody else said something like, well, we know that Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. That was a whole other rabbit hole. Somebody said over dinner afterward, he said, you know, Jesus is the only God who wept and bled. And somehow that proves Jesus. I've never heard that one before. You know, Jesus is the only God who wept and bled. And they kept drawing from the Bible to prove the Bible. It was bizarre. Like, you know, if I was to draw from the Quran to prove the Quran, these really cultural Christians who felt the need to come defend God at a Perkins restaurant after my speech at Iowa State University, right? They would flip out. It was just a weird argument. Well, Jesus is the only God who wept and bled. What? Lots of gods died horribly and bled, and I'm sure they wept in mythologies, past and present. This idea that Jesus was the only one. And, you know, this stems back to the idea that Christianity is so original that it could not have been manufactured by the human imagination. And I think you have totally underestimated the human imagination. Plus, I think there are a ton of different mythologies, religious and otherwise, that are a ton more convoluted, complex, even interesting than Christianity. You know, what, Christianity has a monopoly on a wildly complex and imaginative tale? What, are you kidding? Plus, if you look at Christianity objectively, you realize a shit ton of it was ripped off from previous myths. Anyway, someone said in the chat, are you saying there's no historical evidence of the Bible? Historians disagree. Well, are there places and events that may be echoed or reflected in the Bible? Like, is there a real Jerusalem? Well, of course there is. May there have been a real guy named Jesus who walked the earth that the myth of the God-man was based on? Certainly possible. If those magical, mythical stories happened in a place that we can verify exists, you know, if there is a specific town, a region, a country, whatever, it doesn't make the magical claim true. So I don't really understand the question. Anyway, that's kind of where I've been in my life. What do our listeners have to say? What do you want to talk about today? Let's go to 574. Hi, I've got Dane on the line. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, so I guess I live in the most Bible belty part of the Midwest here, and I've really been teetering between, I guess, Christian and, I don't know, atheist or something less than theist, I guess I would say, for a while. And the question that I've been asking people in religious circles is, you know, what makes God real to you? And no one seems to have a straight answer. You know, I get a lot of, I know that God is real because I had one experience that could easily be explained by some other rational means. So I guess my question for you is, what do you think, you know, really convinces people? I mean, is it just the indoctrination and the use of religious language over and over to describe what they're experiencing, or is there something more to it?
Christianity doesn't fit in a box. You know, with 2 billion Christians on the planet, I think people come to it or were indoctrinated by it or embrace it for a myriad of ways. But I really am convinced that most believers are casual cultural believers. That is a community, right? We're talking about it, a tribe, tribalism. So you've got a group, You've got sort of a group mission, you've got support mechanisms. There are reinforcers so that if you test it too much or you raise too much of a stink about the inconvenient parts, there are sometimes consequences or penalties. You might lose friends or family members. You know, there are a lot of reinforcers at play. I think sometimes it's a comfort mechanism. I think there are evolutionary reasons why people gravitate to the idea of a cosmic parental figure. There's a ton of reasons people do it, but I don't think they're tethered to logic and reason and the evidence. I think it's more of an emotional thing in most cases.
Well, and I assume I know the answer to this based on your current position, but were you ever convinced that you had a supernatural experience? Because myself and my friends who are in the church are constantly saying, well, I feel like God failed because I've lived my life in a quote unquote Christian way, and I've never seen a payback from that, or I've never seen a result that's any better within the church than outside of it. And so people want to say, well, I've had this supernatural experience. Were you ever convinced that you had one? And how did you then rationalize out of that, maybe? I
didn't gravitate as much to the sort of experiential, highly emotional Assembly of God Pentecostal model, which was my mother's. I lean more toward my father's brand of religion, which was it's more tempered, right? It fits your personality. I think people go into religious cultures that reflect them. So if you find people that are really ride that emotional roller coaster, they tend to really want to go to those experiential churches. And if you find a more reserved, personally conservative person, I don't like to jump a pew. I wasn't that guy. I was the one who just kind of sat there and listened. And so I gravitated more toward Baptist and that kind of thing. And in that way, I didn't necessarily feel the Spirit. I never spoke in tongues. What I did, though, was I tended to assign my own conscience. Like if I saw something that I knew was wrong, I would interpret that as, well, the Holy Spirit or Jesus has told me that it's wrong. That's the reason my conscience is kicking in. I was loaded with confirmation bias, so if something happened fortuitously in the world, I would say, well, that's God. God is working. I would ignore all the other bad stuff or the baggage or the cause and effectness of it, and I would just decide God. I was a very lazy thinker. And I know we can all be guilty of that even outside of religion. But, I think when you are eager to embrace, you count the hits, you ignore the misses, it's easy to prop up a God under that model of thinking.
For sure. Well, thank you, Seth. That's a lot to chew on, man.
Well, let me ask you a question, not to, I don't want to monopolize your time, but you say you're becoming, is it accurate to say more and more dissatisfied with the Christian religion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be the perfect way to describe it.
So, I don't get hung up on labels. I'm not going to call you an atheist or anything like that. But Are you starting to doubt all of the supernatural or just the Christian faith?
Well, like you and many others, I've never seen anything that would resemble the supernatural. So, I had friends that would claim that they did. I had, my church isn't particularly charismatic, or the church I used to go to, maybe I should say. I'm on the fence here, man. But I've never seen anything that would prove it true. And the mountain of evidence against whether it's Christianity or all the supernatural is mounting.
Okay. Well, I'm not trying to paint you into a corner.
I guess.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I think my encouragement to you is this, and it sounds like you're already on this path. I mean, we are interested. Sure. Is it demonstrably not true, or is it not demonstrably true? In other words, is there evidence debunking it, or is there any evidence supporting it? And I think as long as you are taking that tack, honestly approaching these quote-unquote truth claims about gods and spirits, etc., I think great. And wherever you end up, as long as you get there on your own terms, I think that's a journey worth taking. And I'm encouraged by that. Okay?
That's been my approach, sir. And I just want to say I appreciate you and your work. And it's been a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you, Dane. Take care of yourself, brother.
Thanks, Seth.
Yeah. 816. Hi. Who's this?
How you doing? This is Jay. How you doing today?
Jay, speak nice and loud for me, my friend. What's on your mind?
I was just going to, hypothetically speaking, let's say, this Bible is real. How would you feel that you led a lot of people astray and down the, path of, eternal destruction? How would you feel?
That's a question my mother's asked me. Kind of like I'm the atheist Pied Piper that is leading people to destruction. There are a few problems with that, if I can answer the question. I think the first one is that this is not a religious model. I'm not an atheist pastor. People are not following as a flock the shepherd who is giving them the truth with a capital T. This culture doesn't work like that. If I say something that's not substantiated, or that it's wrong, or that someone just straight up disagrees with, they'll be the first ones to raise their hand, send me an email, comment in the comment sections and say, well, this is just wrong. Seth is factually incorrect, or I disagree. So this is a more critical culture. The second part that is wrong with it is that this whole idea that I could, quote unquote, lead people to hell or away from the Christian God. The implication there is that I'm actually a threat to God. Like I have the power to rip these potential rescuees, these potential saved children out of the clutches of Almighty God. Why would an Almighty God even worry about a guy like me? So, it's problematic on a great many fronts. And beyond all that, I think a worthy deity would see somebody like me who was genuinely wanting to find out what's true, trying to live a good life. That God would actually reward and defend and protect a guy like me.
You still didn't answer the question. How would you? People can be led astray. They can lead to financial freedom. They could be led anywhere. They could be educated.
Well, I'll allow, if I can interject, I'll allow that perhaps I could be called an influencer. I've had someone who has listened to the show and felt a prompting or an encouragement. But the whole theme of this show is to encourage people, do your own thinking. And I also provide resources to help fuel that conversation.
But you never answered the question, how would you feel?
How would I feel if I thought I was leading people astray?
To a place of if the Bible was real and you led thousands of people to a true, what the Bible says, a burning hell? How would you feel? How would that make you feel?
Well, I just reject the premise of the question because I know the Bible is demonstrably not true.
Answer the question.
Why would you want me to hypothetically say, well, if the Bible, are you quote mining me? Are you going to grab a soundbite and play it somewhere? I mean, I don't understand why in the world you would ask me, well, if the Bible was true and hell was real, how would you feel?
Here's why I asked the question. If I'll turn it around, and if the God that I found out in the Bible was not real, how would I feel? Okay, I led a good life. I didn't hurt anybody. The Bible did help me, in many different ways, drugs, alcohol, a lot of things like that. But, if I found out I did, hey, life, it helped me out. You know what I mean? But I think that atheists are held to a higher accountability because if they are wrong, then, the things that they're saying are going to hurt people in the end. You know what I'm saying?
Hang on. Hold on.
We're just hypothetically speaking. You know what I mean?
Hold on. Hang on. Just a second. Okay.
Go ahead.
If then, according to what you're telling me, if the Bible was true and this broadcast served to fuel an exodus or a walking away from the Bible and people went to hell, you're saying then, if that was the case, what I'm doing here would be hurting other people. Am I understanding that?
We're hypothetically speaking, so I'm saying, yeah, that's
okay.
what I'm saying.
Right. I think okay. All right. Hang on. Hold on. So if Yahweh was the architect of hell, which is an eternal torture chamber, why would your area of focus be on the person who thinks it is historically, scientifically, and morally unsustainable, rather than directing your concern toward the architect of hell?
Well, like I said, I've read the Bible, you know what I mean? And I see the evidence of there is no evolution. I see the evidence, but, there's people that can't see the evidence.
Now, what's the evidence? No, I'm curious. Give me one example.
There's tons of examples of the Bible, historical evidence of the Bible. We don't see monkeys evolving. We don't see any amoebas evolving. We don't see animals evolving. They're not in the fossil records. And Lucy was a fake. Java Man was a fake. Piltdown Man was a fake. Nebraska Man was a fake. Science lies. Science these days are government officials, that are controlled by different by money, basically. So there's tons of evidence. If you I say you should debate a good evolutionist to let's see where you stand too. You know what I mean?
Okay, hang on.
Hello.
So all of the fossil evidence and our monumentally close genetic relationship to chimpanzees, gorillas, other primates, all other life, the examination of our genome, the fossil record which has demonstrated the evolution of life over the course of billions of years, all of that is manufactured by some sort of agenda-driven star chamber of scientists who are all in the pockets of someone else or who simply want to kill or harm God. Am I understanding that?
Correct.
But you do believe that the Bible's description of humankind, created in their current form as Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, you do hold to that as an absolute truth. Am I to understand that?
I'm sorry. I'll have to give you a call back later. I apologize. Sorry.
All right. See you. That was an abrupt end to that call. I was just getting interested. I don't know how you, the listener, were doing with it. By the way, did you read the article? And this is a little few weeks old. Herschel Walker. Now, if you don't follow American football, and I don't, but I know his name, Herschel Walker, considered to be one of the greatest football players of all time, running back, played for the Dallas Cowboys, Minnesota Vikings, I think a few other teams. And he's running for Senate. I believe it's in Georgia. All right. He's running for Senate in 2022 for the Republican Party. And he comes forward and he says, I know evolution is false because why are there still apes? This is what we're up against. Like, I thought the why are there still apes or why are there still monkeys argument, I thought even the apologists had put that one away. I thought they had put that one back on the shelf because they knew, well, this is a weak ass argument. We can do better than this. Why are there still apes? Why are there still monkeys? I wrote about this in my latest book. It's the equivalent of saying, if Adam came from dirt, why is there still dirt? Right? If the Mississippi River comes out of the Missouri River, why is there still a Missouri River? If Americans came from Britain, why is there still a Britain? It just makes no sense. It makes no sense. Herschel Walker going to go and lead Georgia in the United States Senate if he is elected coming up this November. Katie, thank you so much for waiting on me. Katie, are you with me?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can. I appreciate you so much. What is on your mind?
Hi. So I want to talk about what I consider to be a particular issue of Christian nationalism, which kind of has my blood boiling lately because it quite literally hits very close to home.
Okay.
So across from the church where I grew up, there is a high school whose mascot is a Native American brave. And they have a gym called The Reservation. And recently there was apparently construction on the reservation sign over the gym. And many of my old so-called Christian Facebook friends flipped their shit over this and basically automatically assumed that the sign was being taken down because of liberal oversensitivity and that type of thing. So it's basically white people who don't understand that Native American reservations were internment camps for people whose homes were taken from them by white settlers who thought they had this right. And beyond that, their mascot was a white dude wearing a Native American headdress, which to all of them, I guess, was just innocent fun. And I guess it kind of irritated me because I saw it from, old youth leaders who I used to really respect, people in my youth group that I used to really respect who are just very angry about this and being very inconsiderate and, in my opinion, putting their high school nostalgia far over, respecting a whole group of people who were here before us. And the whole time I'm reading this and reading the comments, all I can think of is, what if his mascot were a caricature of a pastor with a cartoon head and a giant cross necklace, and when the team scores, he douses the audience with holy water or anointing oil? Like Christians would raise holy hell over that, but they don't see how they're dealing out the same level of disrespect to Native Americans and their spiritual practices. Like, am I missing something, or is that just kind of insane?
No, you're not missing anything. It's like when the Washington Redskins finally said, we need to make a change. Like the baggage here, right? And the sort of othering of Native Americans. The term redskin has largely been extremely unfortunate, and it is tied to sort of a white supremacy and oppression of the Native American people. Call them redskins. And what's that saying? It's almost never too late to do the right thing. So what you and I say is, well, this is an act of inclusion. Let's go and let's call them something else. Let's just make a name change. For us, it's just basic human decency. And the crowd you're talking about, I'm guessing even your people probably screamed about quote unquote political correctness. Is that right?
Yeah, basically. That's probably the premise of what they are complaining about.
Yeah. No, I don't. I think you and I are watching what is a weirdly insecure, often privileged white and even whitewashing of the past. And I think the resistance toward inclusion, toward empathy and compassion for marginalized groups is something we should be alarmed about. I think people listening in the audience are probably, now that they hear about this, they're probably joining you in indignation, and rightly so.
And part of me, I'm just going to say it. This is in Lakeland, Florida, by the way, which of course it's happening in Polk County.
Florida. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Hashtag Florida. There's always a joy when I log on to Twitter, you know. Oh, boy. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. Florida.
Yeah. No, it's okay. I understand. I've lived here most of my life. So, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just being extremely petty, but like a small part of me, and I don't completely know how to go about this, wants to see if I can write some type of local Native American group and be like, hey, what do you guys think about this? Because I see a lot of them saying things like, well, there were Native Americans at my school who were proud, of it. And it was just the white people who were getting angry. However, I myself have personally spoken to people who are considered indigenous, and they do find this problematic.
Yeah.
So, part of me almost wants to turn it into something because these people are crying about it when, and the funny thing to me is, I think the sign was just under construction. I believe they are planning to put it back. It was just wood rot and they need to replace it. But these people saw it and just lost it. And they're like, these liberals are trying to take away our right to disrespect Native Americans with our school mascot,
it's a persecution complex, right? It's weird to see people who essentially have held the reins of power sit around and flip out about anybody and everything that they consider to be a danger to their freedoms. It's maddening to watch.
Yeah, and I guess the thing that cracks me up the most is this one guy that I know who's complaining about it, who was in my youth group back then. He has to be, 35 by now, and he's complaining about his high school nostalgia being ruined while calling other people crybabies, and I just find the irony insane to watch.
It's like watching the people call liberals snowflakes. And have you ever seen a more snowflakey culture than the freak out Fox News crowd? I have not. Hey, talk to some people, give their stories some oxygen, put them in the spotlight if you've got the resource and the interest in doing so. I think, highlighting the truth of what these groups have gone through and what these symbols represent and why, why basic human decency should win the day. I think that's a worthy conversation to have. Okay.
Right. And I almost want to frame it to them like, you are disrespecting these people's religious and spiritual practices. But if anybody dared to turn yours into a caricature, you would just lose your minds and cry about it. So.
Yeah. Katie, you speak wisdom. And I appreciate you bringing it to the audience's attention. Which town is this, in case they wanted to go look the story up?
It's in Lakeland, Florida. It's Lake Gibson High School. Okay. And I do not know if it has become newsworthy or if this is just people bitching about it on Facebook right now. But yeah, I suppose it could blow up and become a news story if enough people brought attention to it.
Yeah. Well, if there was a genuine issue there, it might be something you could bring to the local news outlet. I don't know how they'd approach it in Lakeland, Florida. They might call, DeSantis and say, we need an opinion from the governor. Who knows what they would do, how they'd handle it. But, it's certainly something worth watching. I appreciate you talking about it here. Okay.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Seth.
Thanks, Katie. See you later.
Bye.
Short break. More of your calls on whatever's on your mind. We're just hanging out together on the broadcast this week. I will be right back. Back to the phones here in just a second. Looking forward to Easter weekend. Not because I'm going to be doing any Jesus stuff, but because for the first time in a few years, the American Atheist National Convention is going to be an in-person convention. Actual human contact. And I have missed you. I've missed people. Well, I've missed some people. But I'm scheduled to speak. Matt Dillahunty, R.N. Raw. Scheduled to speak Mandisa Thomas of Black Nonbelievers, Dr. Ryan Cragen, Debbie Goddard, Allison Gill, so many wonderful speakers. But beyond the speakers, and they're important, it's just a matter of being together for a weekend. Atlanta, Georgia, April the 15th through the 17th. If you want your tickets, they are still available at atheists.org. Okay, on the switchboard, 850, hi, who's this?
Epileptic Skeptic.
The Epileptic Skeptic?
I was in a car accident in 2014, and I had a concussion, and then I was diagnosed with epilepsy. And so now I'm epileptic, and I'm also skeptical.
You're just normalizing it, and yeah, I like that. Well, I'm glad you called. What's on your mind?
I want to apologize in advance to you and my fellow listeners because it's kind of a negative, heavy subject that I have to talk about. My partner and I recently lost one of our close friends from high school. My partner and I are both atheists. We don't believe in any sort of supernatural or afterlife. And so, of course, we're very sad and also angry. You know, we kind of had that angry reaction of, you know, where was this all-loving, all-powerful God when he was dying? You know, why wasn't he there to help him? And we know that his family is Christian, and they're going to have some sort of service. And we would like to go because, you know, we love this guy so much, and we want to see, you know, some of their friends there, and we want to let his family know how much he meant to us. But we're kind of worried about going because, of course, you know, hearing all that kind of stuff about God and Jesus and all that stuff kind of a little triggering for us.
I get it.
So I guess I just wanted your perspective on, like, when you're in this kind of situation, what do you usually do?
Well, I can't tell you where your comfort level is. I went through it with Dad last year. You know, it was Jesus, 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 Jesus. And, you know, it wasn't triggering for me. It was hard to hear, you know, because, well, I wanted to see the memorial service about the man. Who was he? And, you know, what was he like? And what was his personality? And what made him laugh? And those types of things. I mean, I guess it makes sense. He was so overtly and constantly religious that it would stand to reason, I guess, that people would continue to talk about his faith. He loved God. He loved Jesus. He went on mission trips. He cared about religious things. He promoted Christianity. After a while, I did feel the bile start to come up in my throat. And when I was given the opportunity to stand behind the podium, I took 5 minutes to remember the man. This is what he was like growing up, and these are the things that made him laugh, and here's a personal quirk, and here's an anecdote, you know. And people would see him. I was painting a picture with words, and I think that was one of the only parts of the service that were about him. The rest was like church, and it sucked. It was just hard to listen because I'm like, well, you know, why are we talking about religion? We should be talking about him. And I think I can't tell you whether or not you want to put yourself through that. Only you can make that determination. Just know that I think many of us share your concerns and frustration.
Yeah, well, I guess the other thing I meant to mention is that this loss was particularly shocking because we hadn't talked to this guy in like over a year, and he passed from a drug overdose.
I'm so sorry.
And so, of course, thank you. And so, of course, you know, we kind of had that, well, like I said, that angry reaction. And I'm just worried about, you know, sitting there and just kind of stewing in that. And like you said, I guess it's really only I can decide. But
well, if I could encourage
I was
you,
just worried about being rude or anything.
Yeah, no. If I can, I think, was this person a Christian or a God believer in some way?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, he was. And not heavily, you know, but
I get it.
He did believe.
It follows then that there will be a service fashioned after their supposed religious values. And I think that's fine. Fine in the sense that this person's life and belief system will naturally be reflected in their memorial service. So the service isn't about me. It's not about you. It's not about anybody else, or it shouldn't be. I think if you decide to go, you can simply prepare yourself. This is what we're going to be encountering. This is the language we're going to hear. This is kind of what we're up against. But the reason we're going is because we love this person and we'd rather be represented than not. We're not endorsing a faith. We can put up with, or if you decide you can, we can put up with 45 minutes of this stuff because the greater purpose of being there is to just say goodbye. And, you know, if you decide to go, I think that's the tack I would take. Just shore yourself up. Get ready, press through it. And then when you get back afterwards, you can sort of decompress and go, oh my God, I cannot believe it. But you can, in your own lives, make it about this person and not about the religious agenda. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I'm sorry for your loss. It sounds like a terrible, tragic thing, but it draws a circle around the preciousness of life and how we might lose those we care about at any moment. So seize the day, right?
Yeah, it's really made me think about that a lot recently.
So glad you called. I appreciate you very much.
Thank you. You too.
All right, see you. I think the answer is different for different people. Some people will be like, I'm sorry, I want to go to a memorial service, not a church service. I'm not comfortable. I'm not going. That's for them the right answer. Other people say, I know what it's going to be, but I'm going to be there because I'm not going to let a religion keep me from saying goodbye. That's a valid answer, but I think it's a subjective thing. Only you can determine your comfort level. I've got Jen at 774. Hi, are you with me?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
I sure can. What are you thinking? What's on your mind?
So I was wondering about atheism and with politics. Do you think we're anywhere in the near future going to have a politician that's openly atheist? Or maybe we already have had one that's kind of on the down low, because they were clutching their pearls in shock at Obama being a Muslim and Bernie being Jewish. But I feel like if we did have an open atheist in office anywhere, they might be able to make some positive changes, maybe slowly undo what these states are going one by one, just completely undoing Ruth Bader Ginsburg's work and just taking a big dump on Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
But I mean, with our generation slowly getting less religious as they progress, do you think we're ever going to have one in the near future?
Well, I think we've already got some, if not outright atheist, and there might be one at the congressional level. Forgive me for not remembering. I know we have like Jamie Raskin, et cetera, who has liaised with the atheist and free thought community for state-church separation. Very much aligned with us in terms of values. But I don't think we're going to get there by deciding, well, let's elect the politicians and they will make the change. I think that politicians need to reflect the culture. So I think it's a grassroots cultural shift that we're focusing on now, because then the natural progression will be that elected officials represent those who are increasingly non-religious or secular. I don't know that it's going to happen this decade, but I think it's, if we see less and less people caring about religion, you're going to see two things happen. You're going to see more and more elected officials that come out of that culture running for office. I also think you're going to see politicians who are obsessed with self-preservation. They're going to see this growing influential culture of non-religious people and think, shit, I'm not going to be able to get away with all this theocracy. I'm going to have to, at least to a degree, represent my culture, or else I'm out of a job. So I think those two things are going to happen. Not quickly, not soon, but I think in this country it is inevitable.
Yeah, that is the one thing I respect Biden on, is even though he is religious himself, he seems to not really push it that much. But I'm like, if somebody runs for office and then it comes out that, they're an atheist, they don't go to church, they do this, will it be like a huge red mark that people just won't vote for them? Or I kind of wonder, it needs to be like that movie. You ever saw the movie The Campaign, where they have Will Ferrell's character recite the Lord's Prayer in front of everybody and he fails miserably? A lot of these politicians just say that they're Christian just to appeal to those idiots and just to get the votes from the sheep.
The word atheist is certainly a trigger word for the evangelicals, and they are going to always vilify us. We're not just going to be people who have rejected these God claims. We are going to be evil. We're in league with the devil. And then, of course, by effect, we are against freedom and goodness and morality and truth and the American way, quote unquote. I mean, they're always going to come after us if they can weaponize the word atheist. I'd like to see a culture shift so intense, though, that even they, the freak-out theocrats, won't be able to stem the tide. And that, I think culturally, slowly, we are winning out there. That's one of the reasons they're acting like a wounded animal, that they're trying to change the courts and the laws and the policies and the school boards, et cetera, because they know they're losing the culture war. But will it happen, before I turn 60? Probably not. But I'm convinced it is going to happen.
Yeah. One last thing. Funny thing, you're saying how they automatically think we're Satanists. So they think we worship something we don't believe in. I always just go tell them, go worship the Easter Bunny. It's the same thing.
People are like, do you worship Satan? I'm like, I worship Satan as much as I worship Lord Voldemort. That's about as much power as the whole Satan thing has.
And I would love to put like a good without God sticker on the back of my car, but I know I would get keyed in a second.
But maybe
even in New England where it's liberal.
Maybe, in a relatively short amount of time, we will see that change where we don't have to worry about the safety of our lives or property whenever we go out, even in conservative states, to say that we reject superstition. Maybe we'll continue to keep kicking, though, okay?
Yep. All right. Thank you so much, man. You keep up the good fight.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Benjamin, thanks for calling. What are you thinking? What's on your mind?
Hey, I was going to call in and talk about my charismatic upbringing and how I had some quote-unquote supernatural experiences going off one of the earlier callers. And I realized as I became a skeptic just recently, even using the A word sometimes. I'm a teacher, however, so I kind of keep that on the DL down here in the Bible Belt. But as I became more of a skeptic, I realized a lot of those experiences during worship or even during prayer services where people from Toronto Blessing would come down and quote-unquote minister, the more I thought about and studied about the mind and maybe even experienced other experiences brought on by plants, I realized the mind is a very powerful thing. And so some of those heavy weights or presences, is that the word?
No, I get
that
you.
I would feel at those times, I would say, man, maybe I could even recreate that myself, realizing that my mind is a powerful thing. So just kind of a note on that, like, the gentleman earlier was asking, have you ever had supernatural experiences, et cetera, et cetera? And I think many of those things that especially charismatics had felt most likely brought on by the power of our own minds.
You feel like your eagerness, your willingness and eagerness and anticipation of a quote unquote spiritual supernatural event, for lack of a better word, caused it to happen in your brain?
100%. I mean, growing up, I used to make a joke when I would give my testimony because I was on a lot of ministry teams. I'd always make the joke that I was born on the pew, grew up in church, etc. And in a charismatic church, speaking in tongues and all the other manifestations, you're constantly looking. I mean, you see everyone around you who is holier than you, closer to God, doing all these things, experiencing all these things. You're literally, that's what you're supposed to pursue, and that's what you're supposed to embrace and emulate. And
so you felt a kind of peer pressure. They are experiencing God. I need to experience God, or else I'm not as good a Christian as they are.
Pressure from family too, obviously. I mean, my mother was super, super spiritual, and even as a young 4 or 5 year old child, I knew I was supposed to experience these experiences, specifically baptism in the Holy Spirit with the evidence of speaking in tongues. It was such a young age. She would tell me later that I came to her somewhere around 4 or 5 and said I had an experience on this lake on an inner tube where we used to go swimming, and that's where I got my first heavenly language. I could repeat it for you here if you'd like. It was something along the lines of Shandagita, Shandagita, Shandagita. Most likely just mimicking those in the church that I grew up in. So
you had like where Christ walked on water, you tubed on water and had your spiritual moment.
And the Holy Spirit descended on the lake club in Spring Grove, Pennsylvania. Absolutely.
And the Spirit was on the surface of the waters. That's a very profound sounding spiritual story. Well, I don't care what you call yourself, the A word or otherwise. I'm just glad that the journey that you're taking is something that you're doing on your own terms. And I think there are a lot of forces at play that cause us to embrace, believe, act out in these specific ways. But it stems back to the chemistry of the brain, probably some nature and nurture involved there, a lot of different psychological elements that feed into this quote-unquote religious experience. Ultimately, we just want to do what's true, right?
Yeah, and I am a teacher. I'm an educator, ESL, for 15 years. And a lot of that did start in Paul tent-making missionary work, where I went overseas to teach English and to obviously have conversations about God and the Bible. But just recently, at 39, about 3 or 4 years ago, my nephew had me read A Little History of Religion. I was trying to get him to read the first chapter of Mere Christianity because I thought it was such a great argument at the time. And he's like, all right, but just read this, Little History of Religion. And having taught ESLs and having diverse populations of other religions, kind of like the gentleman said earlier, studying comparative religions will mess with you, will mess with your lenses that you've been wearing your whole life. And once I took those glasses off, the Christian lens glasses, there was no anger for me. There was no, both my parents passed away. I was the youngest of 9, so I had older parents. I think for me, when mom passed, she was the last one. I think for me, it was more the freedom to explore without the fear of upsetting them, which I know you still have some of that, tension at home. But
I'm over it. I bitch about it, but maybe it's just scar tissue, but it is what it is, right?
I don't remember where I first heard it or who it was on a podcast, but questions are the answers. What I push all the time in my classroom, no matter what we're talking about. And I think ultimately just helping develop that skeptic mind of questioning, and even the science, even the things that, we accept readily because of science, but always just questioning. So helping kids learn how to think, not learn the facts, is what I'm focusing on. I hope there's a lot of other teachers out there that are heading that way. I know there are.
Thanks for educating. Thanks for your work. Thanks for a conversation. Great to talk to you today, and
thank you.
Best wishes on your journey. Okay.
Thank you.
Have
a good one.
See you later. How to think versus what to think, man. That's the challenge, right? Let's do one more. I've got Ruth. Hi, Ruth. Thanks for waiting on me. What's on your mind?
Hi. I got kicked out of church when I was about 8.
Good for you.
My father.
I'm sorry. I totally jumped in and derailed you. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You got kicked out of church when you were 8 years old. Okay.
Yeah, well, I got kicked out because my father was kind of, when he was little, was in a Catholic church. And he didn't like it because the nuns taught him how dirty he was as a boy. And they used to beat him. And so he married my mother, who was Adventist, dear Adventist. But Dad taught us to question everything you hear. And so I started asking questions in Sabbath school, and they told my mom, don't bring her back. She's not welcome. It traumatized me. When I heard I wasn't welcome under, the Seventh-day Adventists, they all come out of the grave together, dressed as a family, waiting for Jesus.
Oh, wait, hang on, hold on. They come out of the grave?
Oh, yeah. You've never looked at a Seventh-day Adventist book? They're crazy. No, the pictures in the children's book was basically, I'm outside if you're wondering what
You're
all
fine.
the noise is.
You're doing fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the pamphlets say that all good Christians, Seventh-day Adventists, come out of the grave when Jesus comes because they don't believe they go to heaven when they die. They stay in darkness until Jesus comes back. So gives my mother comfort knowing that Dad is lying in darkness. But then at the end, they all come out when Jesus comes back. Children, mothers, fathers are standing in this open cemetery with all the people standing there with their families, which as a child, you look at that and say, oh, yay, we'll always be a family. And then when the church says you can't come back because you question the Bible, I thought as a young child, I was doomed to hell without my family. And my father took me aside and said, that's all bullshit. It's all bullshit, Ruth. You don't have to worry about it. And from then on, I've been a free thinker. And now at 69, I've been so happy teaching other people to question what you don't understand. I've lost friends over religion because they take the Bible so literally.
Your story, I think, draws a circle around the conditionality of acceptance in so many ways. Like, yeah, we love you. Yeah, we accept you until you don't validate us. And you lost your church at a young age. You've had friends, you've had family members, and they said, well, if you're going to disagree, we are willing to cut a cord with you over an idea or a disagreement about an idea.
And, you know, this friend of mine said that good Christians aren't judgmental. And I almost slapped her. How dare you say you're not judgmental? Fuck.
Well, I'm glad you didn't slap her, but I understand your frustration. I mean, I think there are some casual cultural Christians who genuinely do love people for who they are. But this idea that Christianity is inclusive at its core, at its fundamentals, is just wrong.
Yeah, no, my mom's she's 94. She'll be 95 this year. But she doesn't judge people. I mean, I think over the years she's come to realize that people are people.
Well, let me ask you this, Ruth. How are you doing these days?
I'm wonderful. But see, my husband passed away 7 years ago, and people were telling me how wonderful. He's in heaven now. He's not hurting. Bullshit. He's in the universe. He's just out there. I don't want to hear heaven mentioned to me because it makes me mad. And yes, we had a service in a church, but it was a non-binary, church where people got up and said nice things about him. Not one word was mentioned about the Lord because I left instructions.
You mean like a universalist kind of thing? Like not a fundamentalist, but okay.
No, this was a universal type religious place where, because you can't just call up the Hilton and say, I want to do a service. So we had it this way. And, I found comfort knowing that David was just not in pain anymore, that he was relieved of our body. And it gave me comfort.
Regarding your husband, I'm reminded of that line that we are stardust, and to stardust we shall return. I think there's something magical about that. And
it is.
Honestly, Ruth,
it's beautiful.
Even though you're not an Adventist, if you want to dress up as zombies and go shamble a cemetery someday just to have the experience, you just call me and we'll go put our get up on and we'll go out and do some shambling. We'll engage in the tradition of Adventism together. Okay?
Well, here's what I'd love for you to do with me. Back in my early years right in college, we took LSD and went up into the cemetery and had a ball. We did. We were all there. We were having a joyous moment.
That's awesome. Ruth, you make me smile. Yeah. You encourage me, and I think you encourage a lot of people.
So glad. Well,
I wish you the best in your next graveyard LSD fever dream. I'm sure that will be a trip worth taking. And in the meantime, you take care of you. You make me smile. You encourage me. Thanks so much for calling.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. See you later. All right. Bye. LSD in the cemetery. Wish there was like security video of that, don't you? Like you have a mental picture right now. I mean, would people just be sort of lying around like they're taking a mind trip? For someone who's never done hallucinogenics, I have no idea what that looks like. I always pictured that you just sort of lie on the couch and you take a trip in your brain that lasts, what does LSD last? What is it, 12, 24, 36? How long is the trip? If you have a bad trip, how do you get out? Can you get out? I don't know. I have questions because I'm naive about this stuff. Thank you so much for listening today. May all your trips be pleasant ones. And I'll see you back here next week. Take care.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter for a complete archive of podcasts and videos, products like mugs and t-shirts featuring the Thinking Atheist logo, links to atheist pages and resources, and details on upcoming free thought events and conventions. Log on to our website, thethinkingatheist.com.